Hoping I'm live right now. What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you live from. Today, I mentioned earlier on Twitter that I was going to be doing an 2021 MLB playoffs video, and I had the idea to, you know what, rather than show the whiteboard today, let's have some gameplay going on in the background. Now, my Wi-Fi still isn't the absolute best, but it is what it is. We're going to make do with it. I'm looking forward to doing this. So as you can see right now, we have a game sim between the LA Dodgers and the San Francisco Giants. I'm not controlling this game in any way, shape, or form. But, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. But for the time being, you know, I'm just looking forward to actually having gameplay in the background rather than just the plain old whiteboard, which has its perks, but at the same time, it's fun to change it up. So, this video, in and of itself, will not be talking about the 2021 World Series. That will be getting its own video later in the day today. So definitely stay tuned for that if you are interested. But this video is going to be looking at each division, each conference, I should say, each game, each series that was played. We'll talk about like the key players and all that good stuff. Is I'm going to start off with doing the American League, and then we'll do the National League. I would consider splitting it up, but it's easier to just go AL first, NL second. So without further ado, the seeds in the AL were as followed. Tampa Bay was the 1, Houston was the 2, Chicago was the 3, Boston was the 4, and New York was the 5. So that meant the wild card matchup was, of course, the New York Yankees at the Boston Red Sox, which, like I said earlier, was perfect for MLB. They needed that. Now, how did this game go? So, Boston took this game 6-2. Now, the Yankees were, depending on who you asked, a lot of people thought that the Yankees were going to win this game, but a lot of people thought the Red Sox were going to win this game. And when I made my predictions, I said that I loved Eovaldi playing against the Yankees, and that proved to be the right pick, because Eovaldi, once more, had a great game for the team. He played well, he did as good as he could do, and I think he had something like he retired 10 or 11 batters in a row, which isn't easy to do against the Yankees. So he had a good game. His opponent, Garrett Cole, did not. He only made it a couple of innings, which obviously isn't good. He let up a couple homers. I know Bogarts hit one. I know Schwarber hit one. And they weren't bloopers either. They were hit. They were hard contact out of the park. You know, out of the ballpark, I should say, out of the field. So, yeah. The Red Sox, they got going. They had a bunch of good players going. And there was, of course, that one play there with Aaron Judge where the third base coach told him to go and he got thrown out at home. That was probably the deciding play of the game, if you want to call it that. You know, it's going to be the play that everyone remembers from this game. So, of course, a lot of people don't like Aaron Judge, so there's that. But it's going to be fun to look back at this game in the future. Still, Boston defeated New York, which set them up for an ALDS battle against another division rival, the Tampa Bay Rays. So, that series against Tampa Bay for Boston was oh so good. So, we went into this, and there was a lot of questions about who would win this series. But the smart option was, smart option according to most people, was Tampa Bay. Tampa had had a good season to this point. One of, if not their best regular season in history. I think it was their best season in history, actually, heading into it. And right off the bat in Game 1, they did take down Boston. And they shut them out. So it looked like, yeah, Tampa Bay is going to move on. They have no problem. Randy Arozarena was doing, he was keeping up the pace. Nelson Cruz hit a homer in the first game. So he moved himself up into the leaderboards for all-time home runs in the postseason. Boston, however, was getting hard contact. They just weren't getting the results that you needed. So they were getting, hard hit balls to the outfield, but they weren't able to turn them into runs. So that kind of hurt Boston, but and ready to go. So then you get to Game 2. Now, Game 2, again, in Tampa Bay, was different. So in this game, Boston piled on the runs against Tampa Bay. And they just went off on them. There was basically, like, no remorse. Boston killed the Rays 14-6. So, clearly, that's not good if you're a Rays fan. And we all kind of knew it, too. It was a bit of a blowout. So, yeah. Chris Sale got beat up early. So did the Rays starter. So, it was going to be a high-scoring game right off the bat. We knew this. Boston, however, was able to keep the momentum going more than Tampa Bay was. So then you get to Game 3, and Game 3 went into extra innings. And this game went into the 13th inning, and Boston was able to sneak out a victory by 2 runs. So at this point, Tampa Bay is up against the wall. They're down in the series 2-1, in a series that many people think they should be winning. A lot of people are rooting for Boston over New York in the wild card because they thought, Tampa Bay pairs better against Boston than New York. Boy, were we wrong. Then you get to the final, Game 4, and Game 4, of course, was won by the Boston Red Sox in another very close game, 6-5. So, like that, Boston moved into the ALCS, knocking out the Tampa Bay Rays. A lot of people wanted Tampa Bay to win. A lot of people wanted Tampa Bay to have another deep run this year. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be if you're a Rays fan. So, yeah. Now, the other ALDS series was between the Houston Astros and the Chicago White Sox. And right off the bat, I was a little concerned. I was rooting for the White Sox to win the series. And it didn't look like that was going to happen. So, the first game of this series was, I don't want to call it a blowout, but when you lose by 5 runs, it's kind of a blowout. Houston was able to take care of Chicago 9-4, and it wasn't pretty. It wasn't a great game for the White Sox. It could have technically been worse, but the team just wasn't there 100%. The Astros were hitting better, so it wasn't a pretty game for the White Sox. Now, the next game was pretty much the same. It was again another bit of a win for Houston. They won by 5 runs again, I'm pretty sure. Yes, they won by 5 runs again. So at this point, it's clear the Houston bats are ready. The Houston bats are performing. The Houston bats are hot. And Chicago's pitching staff has, no answer. Now, going into the postseason, we were a little concerned about how Chicago's arms were doing. They had looked a little tired heading into the playoffs. They had put some extra strain on them. Some of them have spent some stints on the IL. So there were definitely concerns going into the series for Chicago. The bats were still okay, but they weren't producing at the level we'd seen earlier in the season. So, yeah, at this point, it looked like, okay, Houston might get the sweep to move into the ALCS. However, Chicago's bats came to life in Game 3 as they were able to put up 12 runs on Houston. And Houston didn't do that bad either. They got up 6. So at this point, it's like, okay, this is going to be a hitter's battle. Whereas certain series in the NL were pitcher's battles, this one was a hitter's battle. So now we're at 2-1 in favor of Houston. Game 4 comes into play. And once more, the Houston bats came to life, putting up 10 runs. Chicago was not able to meet up with that pace. So Chicago was sent home. So that meant the ALCS battle was going to be between the Boston Red Sox and the Houston Astros. And it was a bit of an awkward position for a lot of people because it basically a lot of people dislike the Red Sox. A lot of people dislike the Astros because of what happened in 2017. So, people weren't sure who to cheer for. Of course, these are two teams that have both won a World Series in the past half decade. Both World Series wins are somewhat controversial. More Houston than Boston, although Boston did still cheat. But, of course, the Houston story is more publicly known. So, yeah, it was an interesting ALCS. So, the first game was a good one. This game would end 5-4 in favor of Houston. And it was a sign of things to come. This was going to be a very close series right off the bat. You weren't going to have any blowouts. You weren't going to have any, sweeps in this series. It was going to be a good one. Now, game 2 came in, and Boston would end up taking this game by 4 runs. So, like I said, pretty back and forth. The bats are coming to life for both teams, which isn't too surprising. These are two teams that have strong offenses and somewhat suspect pitching staffs. More Boston's pitching staff than Houston's pitching staff, though. Houston's pitching staff, however, had just been lit up a bit by Chicago, so there were still concerns. Anyway, then we go into Game 3. Now, Game 3 saw the Boston bats really come to life. They were able to put up a dozen runs on Houston in this game. They had 4 home runs. Now, Schwarber hit a homer, and it was tough. It's brutal. And then there's that Christian Arroyo guy. He hit a homer. I believe, JD hit a homer. Rafael Devers hit a homer. The Boston bats just came to life. They were ready to hit homers. They were 100% ready to go. And at that point, it looked like Boston might be the team to represent the AL. They had the heavy momentum. They were, going to host Game 4 after winning Game 3 at home. Game 4 comes into play, and Houston manages to silence Boston, putting up 9 runs while only allowing a couple of them. Now, for Houston, just dominated at the end of the game. So, that's what happens sometimes. Momentum carries over, and momentum in baseball is so fickle that you'll have yourself up by by 3 runs. You'll think you're doing good. You only have 2 innings to get through, 5 outs to record. All of a sudden, bam, they win by 7. It's baseball. That's just how it works. It's awful, but that's just the sport. That's what you got to do. All of a sudden your pitcher loses confidence, then your fielder commits an error, and it's all downhill from there. So then you get to Game 5 with the series tied up at 2 apiece, and Game 5 would once more go to the Houston Astros. So at this point, Houston has just put up 9-fold again against the Red Sox, and it wasn't that good. Framber Valdez had an amazing start for Houston. I remember watching this. I like Framber Valdez. I DM'd him on Instagram at one point, and he doesn't speak English well, but he liked my comment and what I said to him, and I was like pretty happy about that because obviously I don't get a lot of interactions with professional athletes. Framber is one of the more well-known ones. At one point I might have a video discussing that, but that's beyond the point. And Yordan Alvarez also had a very strong game in Game 5, so this put a very interesting situation for the Red Sox. Now you had a 2-1 series lead, and now all of a sudden you're down 3-2, and you have to travel to Houston. So this was going to be fun. Game 6 in Houston, and unfortunately for Boston, their bats did not show up. Houston had a strong performance. Luis Garcia, another pitcher, just like Framber, who's on my fantasy baseball team, had another strong outing. And guess what? Yordan Alvarez stepped up as well. So, Alvarez, he had 3 extra base hits that game. None of them were homers, surprisingly enough, for Yordan Alvarez. Oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize they had the little canoes there, kayaks. That's kind of cool. But, yeah, it was a strong game. And the problem was for Boston, they had Nathan Eovaldi pitch in Game 5, and then they put him out in Game 6. That's kind of tough. On only a couple days rest, that's kind of tough. And I remember kind of scratching my head at that one. I'm like, didn't you just have him come out of the bullpen? Obviously, hindsight is 20/20, but at this point, the Houston Astros were your AL champions. That discusses the AL. How about the NL? So, the NL was also going to be a tough one. Now, their wild card was also a very interesting one, mostly because we had an 106-win team, the LA Dodgers, playing a 1-game play-in round. That is something that you'd think would happen back in like the 1920s, 1910s, when only one team made the playoffs from your division, from your conference. Back in the day, that's how it worked. So having it happen in 2021 was crazy. But obviously, San Francisco was one win better than LA. So they had to play a very hot, red-hot St. Louis Cardinals team. Now, fortunately for the Dodgers, they got to host this game. That helped them out a lot. And this game was very back and forth. It was a very close game from the very beginning, and it just continued on and on and on. Now, what ends up happening, getting tongue-tied here, is we get into the ninth inning, and St. Louis doesn't do too much. LA goes up to bat, and we got an unlikely hero, somewhat unlikely hero for the team when... when Chris Taylor hit a walk-off 2-run home run. Cody Bellinger also had a clutch hit in this game. It was a double. I think it was an RBI double. I could be dead wrong on that. But the Chris Taylor hit was amazing. Instant classic type of hit. You'll remember the hit for a while. The Cardinals, they had their chances. But the big mistake for St. Louis, in my viewpoint and most people's viewpoint, was putting Alex Reyes out there. If this was beginning of season, pre-All-Star break, Alex Reyes, good. He was electric. But this was after the All-Star break Alex Reyes, where he was atrocious. This past month and a half, like late August into September, he was one of the worst pitchers in the game. So it was a big mistake putting him out there. And you really have to think, if the Cardinals had, Jordan Hicks healthy, they wouldn't be in this situation. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Anyway, that put the Dodgers in the NLDS in a matchup against the San Francisco Giants. The rivalry between a pair of old-school New York teams. These two teams have hated each other since baseball was founded, essentially. And that's, of course, why I chose to have this game being simmed, which is a 0-0 game, always fun. But it's early on in this game. So we put ourselves in this amazing NLDS series, best of 5, between a 106-win team and a 107-win team. How did it work out? So the first game went to the Giants. The Giants were able to actually shut out the Dodgers offense, and it kind of looked like, at this point, the Dodgers offense has put up 3 runs combined across 2 games. That's not the best sign for them. They're probably going to regress. They're probably going to go home. The Giants have their number. They won the season series. I believe it was 10-9, but still, they won the season series. You cannot expect to win this series. Then we had Game 2. Now, Game 2, the Dodgers bats came to life. They were able to basically play the Giants very well. The Giants, they did what they could, but 2 runs wasn't going to cut it. Cody Bellinger and AJ Pollock both played very well. The Dodgers defense stepped up as well. So that's what you needed. Julio Urias had a strong game. So there was a lot of positives for the Dodgers. The one positive for the Giants in this game was Buster Posey actually put himself atop the leaderboard for most career postseason hits in the Giants' history. So there's that. He put himself above Sandoval, I'm pretty sure was in first place before that. So an easy guy to forget about, but Pablo Sandoval was very good. Anyway, this was just a great game, great series, I should say, more than this game in particular. And of course, now that I mentioned Posey, I do have to wish him the best of luck in his retirement. He is expected to announce his retirement later today, Thursday, November 4th. So, great catcher. Probably the second best catcher, I'd say, of the 21st century up to this point. Behind, of course, Yadier Molina. But I could be wrong. There's always going to be people that are going to say Posada as well. But, yeah. Anyway, then we get to Game 3. So Game 3 of the NLDS was also a good one. This one was, once more, a very low-scoring game. So it's just these two teams know each other so well that, they can rebound from allowing 9 runs one night to allowing 0 the next. As the Giants took this game 1-0. So that put them up in the series 2-1, which is always something. I did see that internet notification button there, or I have my volume on in the background. No, no. Alright, I'm gonna try to wrap it up a little quicker now, because I heard what just happened there, where it really was getting bad. I'm hoping I've been good other than that. So, yeah, I have my phone next to me, it's on data, so it shouldn't be affecting the Wi-Fi, but anyway, this game was pretty much an instant classic here. So, we had the AL game one of the AL games rained out, which was always something. So, Evan Longoria won this game for the Giants with his solo homer. So then we get to Game 4. Now, Game 4 was won by the Giants, 7-2, bit of a blowout. Or the Dodgers, sorry, the Dodgers won Game 4, setting themselves up for a Game 5 winner-take-all NLDS game. Now, this game was always going to be an instant classic, as it's a pair of very strong teams going up against each other. The hero of this 2-1 game was Cody Bellinger. Going into the series, I wasn't expecting much from Bellinger. I don't think anyone really was. He had an awful regular season. He looked horrible. He looked lost. He couldn't hit. And it just was brutal for him. You felt bad for him, but at the same time, you kind of didn't, because they had so many bats around him on paper that they should have been able to survive without him. Cody Bellinger came up clutch with that RBI single. So that was huge. That was huge, and it set them into the NLCS. Who did they get to play? So the other NL series was between the Atlanta team and the Milwaukee Brewers. So I should have mentioned the seeding beforehand, but I didn't. So let me just quickly mention the NL seeding beforehand. So the 1 seed was, of course, San Francisco Giants. The 2 seed was the Milwaukee Brewers. 3 seed was Atlanta. 4 seed was the LA Dodgers. 5 seed was the St. Louis Cardinals. So, yeah, that meant another strong NLDS series. Now, this was going to be, I pegged it as the Battle of Milwaukee, because if you remember, Atlanta had been in Boston first, and then went to Milwaukee, then they went to Atlanta. So, yeah, and then you got the Brewers, who essentially replaced them about a decade later. So it was going to be a good one. And it didn't disappoint. Going into this series, I was expecting a pitcher's battle. And I kind of thought Milwaukee had a bit of an edge on Atlanta. And it seemed to be true in Game 1 when Milwaukee took that game 2-1. Now, Game 2 came into play, and Atlanta was able to take this one 3-0. So right off the bat, you're seeing that it is a bit of a pitcher's battle, because you have a combined 6 runs scored through 2 games. Game 3 comes into play, and once more, Atlanta takes this game 3-0. So, we're getting concerned at this point. I am in particular. I'm not a fan of Atlanta. And I'm just like, okay, this isn't good. It's Atlanta's playing well. That was a good throw, but Atlanta's playing very well. Atlanta's doing as good as they can do, and their pitching staff is surprisingly shutting them down without Mike Soroka. That was my big thing. I'm thinking to myself, wow, if Soroka was playing, they'd be that much better. But, yeah. So we got to Game 4. And Game 4 was the most offensively heavy game of the series, as Atlanta would win 6-5. So, yeah, it was a bit of a surprise to see that. We saw more runs scored in this game than we did the other 3 games combined. But that's baseball. Milwaukee had their backs pressed against the wall. They knew it. Atlanta knew that if they won, they were in the NLCS. So it was going to be good. So then we got to the NLCS, and this was between the LA Dodgers and the Atlanta team. Now, LA has taken out Atlanta in the playoffs multiple times in the past couple years. So, a lot of people were thinking, okay, looks like LA is going to do it again. This is the Atlanta team that's without their best pitcher in Soroka, their best hitter in Acuna. So, Game 1, Atlanta took it 3-2 in LA. That was a little surprising. Game 2 was also won by Atlanta by a single run, this time 5-4. So we're getting pretty, it looks like Atlanta's going to be able to knock out the giant that's been pestering them for the past 5 years in the Dodgers. And the Dodgers are starting to panic. So then we get to game 3. This time, the Dodgers take a 1-run victory, 6-5. So at this point, the road team is 3-0 in the series, which is always something. Always something. Doesn't happen all that much. Then, game 4, Atlanta says, no, we're not letting this happen. We're not going to take this garbage. They kick the Dodgers to the curb, 9-2. 3-1, Atlanta's up on LA. And it's just kind of like, really? This is a healthy team in LA playing against a team that's without their best, arguably best 2 players? That's not good if you're LA. Then you get to game 5, and LA says, you know what? You're right. That's not good. They decide to show up. They put on 11 runs, as Atlanta can't match that, forcing a game 6. Game 6 saw Atlanta continue to play well, taking the game, and thus the series 4-2. Yeah, I don't think anyone was expecting that, but that's where we are. So what I do want to do really quick is, I want to confirm something real quick though before I do it. Yeah, so we had ourselves very strong games, very strong series, and watching these baseball games this year, surprise with how strong Jorge Soler was playing up to this point. Yordan Alvarez for Houston, those were like the top 2 players coming in, and of course Atlanta, Charlie Morton and Max Fried were both playing extremely well for the pitching staff. Freddie Freeman was playing solid for Houston. The problem for them was Altuve. He was hitting homers left and right, but Bregman was cold. Correa was doing okay. He wasn't great. Altuve was committing some errors. So it was kind of brutal. It was kind of who knows who's going to win. And the way things looked, it kind of looked like Atlanta was going to be favored in the World Series. How did that game go? How did that series go? Who would win between the AL champion Houston Astros and the NL champion Atlanta? That will be another video. This was Eric. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have a good rest of your day. Stay tuned for later today when we have the World Series video with a special guest. Have a good one.